I guess having the same expectations for yourself as you would have for a friend that you care about. You're not going to expect them to be perfect, but you're going to cheer them on and you're going to acknowledge what they're doing is a hard thing and all of that. And so I think what you're saying, talking to yourself like that is going to be really key.
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Beck.
And I am Christine Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Dr. Beck is a mindset coach and medical doctor who specialises in liberating driven professional women from the limitations of perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and people pleasing. She's basically the cheat code for getting out of your own way, showing up authentically, and living a life you're proud of.
And Christine is a medical educator and nephrologist who creates resources for doctors in training that I truly think are an unfair advantage. She makes complex topics super simple and takes the pain and uncertainty out of passing your medical exams. Christine and I connected a few years ago via our online platforms, and over the years we've discussed countless highs, lows, and in-betweens of doctor life. And in doing so, we've experienced firsthand the power of vulnerable conversations to show us where we're getting in our own way and underestimating our capacity.
So we want you to be part of the conversation and experience these same results. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors.
Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome back to our podcast. And I'm soon to be opening my new group coaching program, DEADLINE. So jump on my waitlist, the link's down below, so you can be the first to hear about that. I am so lucky to be here with my gorgeous colleagues.
I'm actually not gorgeous. I was just laughing with Beck because we were on different sides of the planet. So I am in Cairns at the moment and I have Cairns hair and I don't care. I just slicked it back and I don't have lighting and there's lots of noise and I don't know how the podcast is going to go. But I'm here for it and I'm so excited to see you back and to see all of you guys as well. I've missed you. It's been a while since we've made a pod because you've been off jetting around. Tell us about your recent adventures, Beck.
This is actually really in keeping with our theme today of like everything kind of being crazy and chaotic, isn't it? Because you're in Cairns. Can you say that one more time for all of us? Cairns?
Oh, I can't say, apparently Australian people say I can't say Cairns. So if Scottish people were to say the word Cairns, they say it like that. But you guys say, how do you say it?
Cairns.
Cairns. It's like the R doesn't exist.
Ain't nobody got time for the R.
Yeah, no one's got time for the R. Yes, I am there for a conference and I was teaching some BPTs as well up here, some physician trainees. It's been really fun. But yeah, in a sea of deadlines, fun, which is what we're going to talk about today. I guess just before we jumped on, we were talking about obviously catching up and things and talking about our lives recently have been really crazy. So it's all self-inflicted. It's all, you know how when you plan things that you really actually do enjoy and you're trying to hit big goals, but whilst you're living and breathing it, you're like, whoa, like, how and why did I sign up for this? And I've had a few things. So obviously I have my business where I'm creating resources for doctors in training, studying their exams, and I've got a written program. So I'm selling tickets to this membership and people are showing up to that. So that's obviously a real priority. But in order to do that, I've got to research the topic, fact check the topic, make the slides, do other things, rehearse it, show up, deliver it. And that was my main thing, but that led into other meetings at work that I had to prepare for and other teaching commitments at work that I had yet to prepare for. And then now I've had 2 other public speaking commitments in this week, one yesterday and one tomorrow. And so it just feels like public speaking. And it's insane actually. So I must be building skills here, but and I wouldn't change it if I'm honest, but it is extremely stressful. And I'm just wondering how I can I guess the learnings that I want to take from that I want to talk here today on the podcast about and get your perspective on. But I'm also wondering, like, is there a way to do this that's less stressful? Because I can see a lot of other public speaking things in front of me as well. So I don't know. What about you, Beck? You said you were in a busy season as well. What's going on for you?
Oh, I mean, first, I just want to say, I feel like this is such a great topic because it's so relatable, I think, to so many doctors. I mean, it's obvious for doctors in training that you just end up with these times that are like jam-packed of like, I've got this journal club, I've got this case presentation, I've got this MDM, I've got, I don't know, a meeting, then you've got whatever other extracurricular leadership or whatever things that we can end up with on our plate as a doctor in training. And then, of course, as a consultant, it doesn't take much beyond your clinical work to end up with, you know, these extra commitments that pile up and sometimes can just almost clash, like what we could probably say is happening with you right now. Like what's happening is there is a clash. This is not a well-planned calendar of how you would ideally conduct yourself as a professional. You're just showing up to what's transpired. So I really love this topic because I think it just, it's us facing reality as opposed to being in these kind of perfectionistic fantasies about how we would ideally show up to these big events, these like, let alone public speaking, which is terrifying, separate from whatever academic goodness needs to be injected into it. I've got a couple of deadlines coming up myself, so it is relatable to me. And some of these, as you said, are self-inflicted. You know, I've got goals I'm trying to hit with my group coaching program opening soon. I'm producing the lessons for those, and I obviously have a certain standard that I want to deliver them. And I'm creating these from scratch. You know, these are my own personal concepts, my own intellectual property. So I need to create the concepts. And then, as you say, you need to do all of you need to put all the work into being able to present it in a way, deliver it in a way that people can receive it really easily and it really relates to them well. And then I'm over here in Madrid at the moment. So, oh my gosh, I learned about the importance of the R in cans. I keep trying to order a takeaway coffee and I try and say, Jabar, that's the word takeaway. And they're like, no, Jabar. Jabar.
Like, but I'm Australian, I don't do R's. R's are wrong. How would a Spanish person say cairns?
Cairns. Cairns. You've been validated. Don't worry. It's the Australians doing it wrong. Okay.
Okay.
They're all ganging up on me now. You, the Spanish, say your R's.
Say your R's. That sounds so glamorous to me. And I'm actually really excited because it sounds really exciting. You said the name of your program is Dear Darling. That is the first time you've mentioned that on the pod. So I'm very excited. That is a great name.
It's very real in my head now. So I'm creating my group program modules because I want to have a few modules done before I open the group. So everybody's got some stuff to chew on and work on to be able to bring to coaching so people can kind of be self-paced, self-sufficient. And then I've got my one-on-one clients and I'm actually presenting at the Wonka conference this year, which is the World Conference for Primary Care Physicians or General Practitioners in Australia, because it's being held in Sydney this year. So I got selected to do a workshop there. And so it's a 90-minute workshop and the slides are due in 2 weeks. And it's just annoying because it's like, I came here wanting to just give my whole heart to my group clients and then my one-on-ones as well. And I gotta make this new presentation in 2 weeks from scratch as well. So, you know, it's just, it might not sound like a lot, and I'm so lucky that I don't have to work in the hospital during this time, like most people listening, but it's the same situation where this is the level I want to achieve for this work that I'm doing. These are the amount of resources I have in terms of time and energy. So we need to negotiate with that, with what we produce and how we use our time, our resources in the meantime to get to that place. So yes, I think this is a great topic for us to talk about, because I think in general what happens is we feel like a victim to these circumstances where there's too much to do and not enough time, not enough energy, and we feel overwhelmed, and then we just try and just keep our head above water and work urgently until we can show up to that meeting, that presentation, that whatever deadline it is. And it can be a really hard time that we just survive, when there are probably some things we can do to take care of ourselves during.
It's overwhelming, isn't it? And I think, you know, you're doing this program and everything is like, I don't know, nothing could be more important. It's like your baby. It's something you're creating. I think there is a lot of pressure in that. And so although it is self-imposed, like you run the risk of, if you think about it too hard, getting overwhelmed and then paralyzed, right, as well. So even though we have all these deadlines, and you can, if you think about them, you literally can get in your own way and find them even harder. You can make everything worse if you don't approach it the right way. And I think this is something I always love to talk to you about, because you always seem to unpack the sort of the best way to come at these situations in terms of mindset and in terms of staying in control of your thoughts, so that your experience of things can be kind of ninja Beck style as opposed to my baseline style, which is just struggle. Before I came on, I was thinking about how would we sort of talk about how you do this, and I'm in the middle of it, and I can't tell you that I know the answers, because right now all I'm literally doing is going from one deadline to the next, to the next, to the next, and just fulfilling the deadline. And I don't think I've quite actually had a chance to think, is there a right way to do this, or is there? So I guess I'm curious what you think, kind of watching on. What would you suggest with your coaching clients, or what are you telling yourself at the moment? How are you staying in control of everything?
Well, it's so interesting too, because I know a bit of your background, because, you know, we're talking about what's happened for you, what's happening for you in the week to come and maybe the week before, but I also know the background of what you've been doing for the last sort of month and months, because you have made decisions that have led you up to this place that you're in right now. And those decisions were actually priority decisions that I think you've done very well, because when you look at these kind of situations, I think that urgent, important framework can be really useful in terms of setting priorities. The risk is that when we have these deadlines, especially when we're terrified of some of them, so for example, any public speaking situations, for most people, apparently public speaking is supposed to be like one of the most common and worst fears that we have. I can't validate that with any research, but anecdotally, amongst my close friends, most people would agree. When we have these multiple deadlines, and some of them seem extremely threatening, it just creates this perfect storm for us to feel really overwhelmed and fearful. And the overwhelm probably is really fed by the fear. And when we feel overwhelmed and fearful, it's very easy for us to project urgency onto everything. And by that, I mean to say that everything coming up is urgent, and then to just focus on the next item on the list chronologically in terms of date, to make that the priority because it seems the most urgent, because it's the next most threatening thing, as opposed to looking at the other axis here, which is importance. How important is this this next activity that I'm doing, this next presentation or whatever it is, weighed up with the urgency. And I know that you have done that yourself, because your baby is your medical education business, taking care of your BPTs. And so you've known about this CANS conference for a while, but it hasn't been something that you gave your time and energy to several weeks ago, because you were aware that you have you wanted to show up for your programs, for your VPTs, because that was most important to you. And I think that maybe you didn't recognize that you did that, but this conference that you've got coming up has become more urgent because you only gave yourself, the couple of weeks to prepare for it. It's a 90-minute session. It's massive, because you made the decision that there are other more important things to do with your time earlier. And I think that's a really skillful thing to do. And it's particularly difficult to do when you're feeling overwhelmed as you're looking at your calendar and as you're looking at your tasks. It's very hard. In my example, my slides will be due for this conference in a couple of weeks. It's something that does make me a bit nervous and scared, because it's also like a 90-minute block. It's a world conference. It's all like new and flashy and da to me. It's easy for me to think, oh, this is so important. But I've calendared such that I'm not going to even begin to create that content, and I'm creating it from scratch. I'm not going to begin to create that content until about 10 days out from when the slides are due. And that's because what's more important is that I retain all my brain space to create these lessons, these modules for my group program. So it's a very deliberate decision that makes me really uncomfortable. The thoughts come into my mind, and they have been coming into my mind over the last week, just kind of intruding, of being like, oh, why don't you just do the first bit of the workshop? Why don't you just create a couple of slides? Why don't you just create a couple of concepts? It's trying to create some safety for me to be like, to almost guarantee or prove to me that I'm going to be able to work it out, that it's going to be okay. But that's just me wanting to feel okay. It's me wanting to soothe the urgency that's coming through, the overwhelm that's coming through. But my higher level executive function decision is, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to give it any energy until 10 days out. For now, I'm focusing on my group work. Does that make sense in terms of the urgent, important framework?
It does. And it feels so brave. It feels, because I didn't do that consciously. I felt like I was surviving, and I was prioritizing my little ducklings, but they were also the first deadline. So I definitely don't want to take credit for that. I did not do that consciously, but you're doing it consciously, and you're actually saying, nah, I only want to spend this amount of time on that, and I will make sure that I don't start that, so that you will keep that limited. And that's amazing. That's brave.
You're not doing it consciously, but that's also because you have been very conscious over years now that this is your priority. And this is highly valuable and something that you care about. So you didn't have to do it consciously. In this case, with your programs, with your BPTs, you don't have to remind yourself that they're your number one priority. So that's great. But we have the opportunity with these other new, different things to decide where they sit in our priorities. So I think that's just your values and the work you've done before, your commitment you've done before, shining through for you. And you can use that deliberately as well, as you're saying. You can consciously decide what's important and then bravely be like, okay, so I'm not going to touch any of that stuff until this date.
And what about, just building on that, when is it okay to cancel things? So for example, in amongst these kind of more major public forum kind of exciting, expansive opportunities, I had the work meeting, and that's fine. I mean, not to say anything bad about the work meeting, but I have full control over the work meeting. I could have cancelled the work meeting. I have the power to do that. But I was like, no, I'm doing the self-imposed thing to myself. I'm not sure exactly why I'm doing that, but I am going to do it, and I'm going to show up for it because I said I would do it. Is that wrong in these seasons? Should we be trying to set more boundaries and create more white space and actually minimize our commitments? What would you say to that?
Can I ask you in this case? So there was the question obviously arose. Should I cancel? Could I cancel this meeting? Do I want to cancel this meeting? Is the question. And I guess that's maybe a better way to pose the question, not should I, or is it okay? Because you can do whatever you want. There are consequences to what you do, but you can do whatever you want. And when you say, do I want to, there's the immediate effect of like canceling the meeting. In this case, do I want to cancel the meeting? And with that, do I want to accept the consequences of that? So to answer that question, first, we want to make it a genuine question. Like, you can do whatever you want. There's no right or wrong. There's just what you choose, and then there's the consequences of it. And when you say, should I or can I, it makes me think the consequences might be quite loud for you here, or at least something that we don't know if it's going to be like values-based. It might just be the consequences are loud because it incites some fear or feels wrong and things like that. So it's really interesting to look at weighing them up, and you can't do them when you're like binding yourself to what you should do and what's right or wrong. You can't ask that question of yourself, really. You won't get to see the clear pros and cons. So when you think about, do I want to cancel the meeting? Like, you even go back in retrospect, what's the answer? Just first, do I want to? And what would be the consequences? And then you can think about whether you want those consequences or not. You're willing to accept them.
And the answer was definitely, yes, I want to cancel the meeting. And then I had this internal narrative that was like, no, you're not the type of person that does that. You are the type, I'm trying to become the type of person I want to be, which is the kind of person who can show up and do public speaking at short notice. So I was like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to rise to the challenge of this, because that's what I do now. So it's more like, recently I've been trying to work on not giving up on myself. So an example of this is, like, I've always admired the way when you're creating content, you show up consistently. And although I'm so excited by recently on YouTube, I've managed to be putting out a video every single week or so. It used to be, fortnightly or sporadically even, right? And I wasn't able to continue. Well, not that I wasn't able, I don't know what it was about. I wasn't prioritizing it, or I would just let other things creep in and distract me. And then I really wanted to become the type of person who just does that. That's who I want to be. And so I think it ties into that, because I was working on consistency and not allowing myself to have excuses. That mindset then bled into this thing, which, I hadn't initially set up any plans for that scenario, but it's just like, I'm now the type of person, that's who I am, and I'm trying to change my identity consciously. And I think I got that from the Atomic Habits book, so it's nothing new. I'm sure lots of people have heard that before, but I think that's what it was that made me push through. But it wasn't pleasant, and it was kind of unnecessary. And like a lot of these public speaking things, especially the work meeting, it was honestly a bit of a flop. Like, no one was really that excited about it. People were fairly underwhelmed by it. It was like a journal club thing. So after all that, upon reflection, I was like, maybe I should have just cancelled that meeting and got all that time in my day. But I was motivated by just trying to show up as the kind of person I want to be. That was it.
Yeah. Because that's such a different, like, you actually ended up framing that in a way of saying you want to go to the meeting.
But I didn't really, deep down, or superficially, or any level. I never really want to go to any meetings in life, Beck, but yeah. All right, let's say that.
Listen to what you said. So you said, so your immediate response of, do I want to go to the meeting, was no, I do not. But then you actually said, I want to go to the meeting because I want to be the kind of person who shows up consistently. I want to build that skill. I want to take this opportunity.
Yeah, this is what you do, Beck. This is the magic you have. Yes, true.
It's just, and now in retrospect, you're like, I wish I had that time back. That's more interesting data. You want to weigh that up against, I could have had that extra time. In retrospect, I'm seeing that time would have been really valuable. So now you're really weighing up these two things of taking the opportunity to show up consistently and be that kind of person, build that skill, versus having that time. Now that's the question that you get to. You can't change it in the past, but might be an important question when this situation arises in the future. Would I rather have, do I want this time because I've got these cascading deadlines, or do I want to take this opportunity to build this new skill and become this kind of person? Really different question of like, versus, am I allowed to cancel the meeting?
Yeah, it is a fascinating thing. And I guess I can just see this happening for such a long time now that I'm trying to become at one with it, because I think I can see a bit more of a space, but ultimately that is the person I want to be. And I think for a lot of people listening, it's the same. Like when we do these things, when we do presentations or journal clubs or whatever it is we're being asked to show up for, or conferences, a lot of people are presenting their research at conferences and all those things. It is kind of a big deal, although it's and some people find it so natural, but when we're doing it, when we're showing up for it, it feels like our sort of reputation's on the line. It feels like it's part of a bigger picture, that I do this and then these people will think this about me. And that might not be what's actually happening, but it does feel like that in the moment. And so I think these seasons that we are experiencing, I think, is a really common thing for doctors in general to experience. Just that constant pressure and deadline. And then I guess letting go of perfectionism, like you always talk about as well, in that setting can be challenging. Do you have any advice for that? So I think I'm learning that lesson at the moment that, like, if I was to do what I'm doing right now, say maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it would be a completely different experience, I think, because I have learned, probably by doing some of your courses and things as well and watching your content, but I have worked on letting go of perfectionism along the way. But there was a time where I would be crippled by it and I wouldn't be able to show up and try. And I actually think that when you let go of perfectionism, you sometimes do a bit better in the moment because you're more relatable and you're more authentic anyway. So there's a kind of a magic to it, as opposed to, like, when you're watching someone who's doing public speaking, you don't want them to look uncomfortable. You want them to succeed, because if they look uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable in the audience. So you would much rather watch someone who's failing kind of happily and kind of they're sort of laughing at themselves, rather than someone who's getting in their heads with perfectionism and it's so visible on their face, right? So I would encourage everyone to have a look at their perfectionism and set yourself free from it. Maybe, check out Beck's stuff, you'll do well. But do you have any sort of hacks for something that we could go to right now if we do have a presentation coming up and we have a short deadline? How do we let go of perfectionism today in this moment for that immediate thing in our future? What would you say to that?
Well, you just said the most insightful thing a little bit back. You said it like it was no big deal. You said when we have, we're in these situations where, even say we're talking about the situation where your deadlines and the things you got to get done are well and truly above the time that you have. Everything's kind of urgent in this situation, and so you're overwhelmed, and so you're just kind of surviving and getting through and doing your best. And you touched on how that creates this big threat to us, because it's not just about, I don't know, the presentation itself or the meeting or the interview, whatever it is, but the greater meaning that has to us. It feels a lot bigger. The consequences feel not only big in themselves, but then rippling potentially. You think of the example of, you have a job interview coming up and you have, I don't know, a journal club presentation with your colleagues who are on the selection panel for your advanced training or something like that. Or, and so these things are like days apart. And these things you can see can have significant consequences for your future. But even with less obviously directly related events where there's not a clear, like, if I don't perform well in this job interview, I won't get this job, and then my trajectory will change. Whether it's true or not, we often think about, a conference presentation as being something that's highly threatening to us, and that has not only a big immediate consequence, but potentially bigger rippling consequences. And that is where perfectionism comes in. So to me, perfectionism isn't wanting to do everything perfectly. You're not stressed because you want to do a perfect conference presentation, and you're not going to be happy unless it's perfect, brilliant, dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, right? That's not what we're worried about. Perfectionism is when you don't meet your expectations, wherever your expectation lies, whatever standard you've decided is enough. We see that people have perfectionism if when they don't meet that expectation, they make that mean something terrible about themselves and the potential for their future. Okay? So it's not about being perfect. It's about when you don't meet your standard, you create these big consequences in your mind. And that load that we carry with us is really heavy and overwhelming and difficult to do work from. When we're constantly in fear that we're not going to meet the expectation, let alone the multiple deadline expectations that we have, to try and work from that place is really difficult. And I have a high level, maybe not high level, I have a higher than average level of awareness of my thoughts after doing this work for many, many years now, this coaching work. And I can see, even with all of my deliberate work over the time, that those thoughts still come into my mind, those threatening thoughts come into my mind as I'm trying to do this work. That, you know, maybe I'm going too slow, maybe I'm falling behind, maybe this isn't hitting the mark, maybe this is going to be a flop, maybe how I'm explaining things doesn't make sense here, all these thoughts about how I'm not meeting my standard. And those thoughts don't exist in isolation. They cascade into, so maybe I should just quit now. Maybe I'm not going to get what I want to create, what I want. Maybe this was all for nothing. Maybe I'm not good enough, right? They cascade out into these bigger consequences. So we need to be able to see those thoughts, to not let them affect us. And that's not a 1-2 step process. That's a longer process of building self-awareness and then being able to respond to those thoughts with some objectivity or some rational thinking. And if that doesn't work, then some good old self-compassion. More than anything in this time, logic's not usually the answer, but self-compassion, like, hey, I understand why, and it's so understandable why you are feeling overwhelmed right now. It's so understandable why you fear that consequence, To be able to deal with all of these thoughts that aren't nothing, they're creating stress in our bodies, which is counterproductive, as you were saying, for how we want to work and create, and then how we want to perform. So that would be my sort of immediate intervention. It's to take your thoughts, give your thoughts the time of day, give yourself a moment. I'm talking like a couple of minutes to just write down on a sheet of paper. When I work now, when I do hard things, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I keep a sheet of paper next to me to write down these thoughts, because I know they're coming. I have the level of self-awareness to know that these are habitual for me, they're coming. So I have this piece of paper to write them down so I can detach from them and not let them be the thing that fuels me and continues to create stress. And then I deal with them in different ways. But I don't want people to try and to make their strategy to just push through or to try and do this work and try and perform your best while believing that it's all going to go wrong and you're not going to be okay, and so on. So I want you guys to listen to your mind. I want you to accept that negative bias that we have in your mind. I want you to accept that you're a human and you have fears. I want you to accept that just because you're not aiming to do things perfectly doesn't mean that you're not going to have those self-critical thoughts in your mind. And I want you guys to, as you decided with that meeting, do it not because it'll be a once and done quick fix, but so that you can start building this skill for yourself. Because as a doctor, this situation is probably not going to stop. And if you're somebody who's listening to this podcast, you're probably somebody who wants to do more and create more with their life regardless. So the moment you hit a level of comfort, you're probably going to be stretching and reaching for more anyway. So how does that land in terms of feeling like it would make a difference? What does that seem unrelatable at this point in terms of how you could make the situation better right now.
Yeah, well, what really resonates in the sort of short term, because I think having self-awareness and being able to sort of look at your thoughts, depending on when the deadline exactly is, I think self-compassion and giving yourself a break, and like, I guess having the same expectations for yourself as you would have for a friend that you care about. You're not going to expect them to be perfect, but you're going to cheer them on, and you're going to acknowledge what they're doing is a hard thing and all of that. And so I think what you're saying, talking to yourself like that, is going to be really key.
That could be a nice simple strategy. So if you have like a part of your page, split it down the middle, which are your sort of non-purposeful, intrusive thoughts. And then you could split on the other side of the page as like a quick antidote. And you say, my loving friend, like what I would say to a friend. And when, you're not the kind of friend, right, who just says things to make people feel better, like just to relieve their emotions. You want to see this person succeed. So as their friend who wants to see them succeed, how would you respond to those thoughts if they said them to you? That's a really nice little like 1-2 punch of self-awareness, and then being intentional with how you deal with the thoughts. That's really cool.
I love that. And the other thing I love that you said was what you said just then about how, like, when we're reaching for something, as we grow and we sort of level up, then we're never going to stay there. We're going to then proceed to the next level and another version of ourselves, another version of growth. So I think it's super helpful. What you just said was kind of normalize that you're probably never going to feel entirely comfortable with with something, because you're always going to be reaching for something higher. And the fact that you are uncomfortable is probably something to cherish and applaud yourself for, because it means that you're growing, isn't it?
It's like the meeting. You could have not gone to the meeting. You chose to go to the meeting because you wanted to stretch yourself.
I wish I had not gone. I still wish I had not gone to the meeting. I regret the meeting, but I went to the meeting. Just being honest.
Oh, I was going to say, I wish we had said this at the start, actually. If you could comment overwhelm, if this resonates with you, whether you're in the time right now, just say overwhelmed now, where you've got these like cascading avalanching deadlines coming, where, in terms of urgent, important, everything's just urgent. Comment overwhelm, and comment overwhelm also if this just feels like so familiar to you, where it just kind of feels like the avalanche of it all. Because I do think this is very relatable, and I also think the way that we treat ourselves during this time drastically changes our quality of life, and it will allow us or disallow us to keep being the kind of person who keeps growing. If we make this experience too painful, we're going to run and hide. We're going to slowly make our lives smaller and smaller and smaller. And it might feel immediately more comfortable to do that. But if you're the kind of person who stretched in the first place, you'll probably get uncomfortable in staying small as well. It'll just be a different kind of discomfort. So whatever you do, it's going to be uncomfortable. If you start to do this work and really take care of yourself during these times, at least your discomfort will lead to that stretch and change and evolution, as Christine was saying. So let us know, and please ask us any questions down below as well that you have, because it's not a simple topic, and I think Christine and I have just scratched the surface here.
I like that word, avalanche, the deadline avalanche. We should call the episode.
It feels dramatic.
Are you in a deadline avalanche? Click here. We are too. But no, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and listening. It feels so great to be back. And yeah, we should be on here a bit more often. Hey, Beck. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye, everyone. Bye.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up